After moving to the outskirts of Santa Fe, I thought I'd finally found the peace I'd been craving. The air was dry, the land stretched out like an old blanket, and the small adobe house I bought felt like a fresh page. After years in a crumbling marriage that left me drained, I needed a place that didn't echo with someone else's disappointment. But as the weeks passed, the silence started to weigh differently. It wasn't rest anymore, it was vacancy. A friend from town recommended someone to help fix up the place. He's young but responsible. Comes from a rough patch, but he's solid, she said. That's how I met Ezra. 17, soft-spoken, and serious in a way most boys his age aren't. The first day he came by, he wore a faded hoodie and greeted me with a simple nod. Then he got straight to work. I watched him from the window as he swept the porch and trimmed the brush around the fence. Every movement was purposeful. Not lazy, not rushed. Just steady. It struck me how rarely I'd seen that kind of quiet discipline in someone so young. At first, our conversations were brief. Mostly about tools, chores, or the heat. But over time, a rhythm developed. One late afternoon, after he helped me clear a storage shed, I offered him some leftover enchiladas. He hesitated for a second, then accepted. We sat at the kitchen island, the sun casting long shadows across the floor. That was the first time he shared anything personal. My mom left when I was 10, he said quietly, eyes on his plate. Dad's around. Kinda. But not really. I didn't pry. I just nodded and listened. I knew that hollow feeling too well, the ache of being near someone who's already emotionally gone. After that night, I began to notice the absence of his presence on the days he wasn't around. I found myself making extra servings, leaving cold drinks on the porch, without thinking. He never made a big deal out of it. Just smiled in that quiet way of his, and went about his tasks. Then one day, after we finished hauling old furniture to the curb, Ezra leaned against the wall and asked, "Do you like it here? I mean, really?" His tone wasn't rude or intrusive. Just honest. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I hadn't asked myself that in months. That night, the stillness in the house felt different. Not comforting, just hollow. Ezra's question kept echoing in my head, challenging me in a way I wasn't ready for. The weeks that followed were quieter, but not in a lonely way. Ezra still came by most mornings, his knock a soft rhythm I had come to expect. We spoke a little more each time about books, music, what made people stay or leave. He never overshared, never tried to impress me. But his presence settled into my days like a gentle pattern. I didn't realize how much I relied on it until one evening when the sky turned lavender over the hills, and he stayed later than usual. We had been clearing out some old storage bins when I invited him in for dinner again. It had become an unspoken habit on slower days. I reheated some leftover curry and poured us both iced tea. The kitchen lights were low, the air soft with early spring warmth. We ate in silence for a while, and then he said it, out of nowhere. "I don't want to just work here." I looked up, unsure if I heard him right. He held my gaze, serious and still. "I mean, I don't want this to be temporary. I want to stay. Really stay." I set my fork down slowly. "Like live here?" Ezra nodded. "Like family. Or something close. I don't belong anywhere else." "Not really." The room shifted. I could feel the weight of his words settle like dust in the air. My heart tightened, not from discomfort, but from something deeper, something I couldn't name. I studied him, this 17-year-old who moved through the world like someone twice his age, who kept his pain folded into quiet corners. He didn't flinch. His voice didn't tremble. But I could feel the fear behind what he was asking. He wasn't proposing something inappropriate. He was asking for belonging, for safety. Still, my breath caught. Because the strangest thing was, I wanted to say yes. I wanted to offer him what neither of us had ever been given freely. Unconditional presence. But I didn't say yes. Not that night. I told him I needed to think. That something like this couldn't be decided on impulse. He nodded, slow and unsurprised. His shoulders sank just a little, but he didn't argue. After he left, I stood by the sink, staring out into the dark. The kitchen suddenly felt too still. That quiet question he had asked days earlier, "Are you really happy here?" returned, louder than before. It wasn't just about the house. It was about my life. Ezra had become a part of my world in a way I hadn't anticipated. He filled cracks I hadn't even realized were there. I knew I couldn't ignore that, not anymore. Things began to shift after that night, not in any dramatic or explosive way, but subtly, like a door creaking shut inch by inch. Ezra still came by, still worked around the property, still nodded when I greeted him. But there was a hesitation now. The silence between us changed. It wasn't the peaceful kind anymore, it felt tight, charged with something neither of us knew how to name. He talked less, smiled less. When I tried to bring up dinner or ask how his classes were going, he offered short answers and avoided eye contact. I thought maybe he felt rejected. Maybe my pause that night had confirmed the very thing he feared, that he didn't belong. I kept telling myself that time would smooth it over. But then I started noticing things. Small things at first. A few tools misplaced. A couple of bills missing from the envelope I kept in the drawer by the door. Once, I walked past the guest room and saw him quickly put away his phone and close a tab. I didn't ask. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. That changed one night when I came home earlier than expected. The garage door was open. Loud music spilled out into the air, and laughter I didn't recognize echoed off the walls. I stepped inside to find Ezra, with 3 older teens, none of whom I knew. The place was a mess. Fast food wrappers, empty bottles, smoke I didn't want to identify. The moment they saw me, the others scattered like shadows. But Ezra stood there, unmoving, defiant. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at me like I was the one who had crossed a line. Finally, he said, "You only care when it's convenient for you." That hit harder than I expected. His tone wasn't angry, it was something worse. Resigned. Tired. "You made me feel like I had a place," he continued. "And then you backed away like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter." I tried to explain, tried to say I was just trying to be careful, that I didn't want to hurt either of us by moving too fast or making the wrong decision, but he wasn't hearing it. His pain wasn't about that night. It was deeper. About everything we hadn't said, everything we'd let sit between us, without facing it. In the end, I told him he couldn't stay there anymore. That he needed space, that we both did. I offered to call the family friend who had introduced us. He didn't argue. He just nodded, grabbed his backpack, and walked out. And when the door clicked shut behind him, the silence that returned wasn't familiar. It was hollow, final. And I knew, whatever we had built between us, whether real or imagined, it had cracked beyond repair. Weeks turned into months, and the quiet in my New Mexico home settled back into its old rhythm, structured, silent, and a little too sterile. I kept busy, gardening, painting, even volunteering once a week at the library. But no matter how packed my schedule became, I couldn't escape the ghost of Ezra. He was everywhere, his boots still tucked behind the back door, the screwdriver he favored still resting in the drawer, the water glass he'd always used that I hadn't brought myself to wash. I didn't try to reach out. I told myself it was better this way. Cleaner. Safer. We'd both crossed a line, even if neither of us had put it into words. But late at night, when I sat alone with a cup of tea and no one to talk to, I'd wonder what he was doing. If he was okay. If he hated me. Then one Monday morning a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name in tight, careful handwriting. Inside were 3 short paragraphs. Ezra apologized, not for his feelings, but for the confusion they caused. He admitted he didn't know how to handle what he was feeling, and that he lashed out because he thought he was about to lose the only stable thing he had. He ended the letter with a line that burned into my chest. I just wanted to be enough for someone to stay. That was it. I sat with the letter in my lap, rereading those words until they blurred. I didn't cry. Not right away. But later that night, the tears came fast and sharp, not out of regret, but from finally understanding that both of us had stepped into something neither of us had the tools to navigate. We were 2 broken people, each carrying abandonment in different forms, hoping the other would fill what had been left empty. I wrote him back. I told him he had always been enough, but that I wasn't the person to give him the kind of safety he deserved. Not then. Maybe not ever. I didn't make promises. I didn't try to redefine what had happened. I just told him I forgave him, and I hoped he forgave me, too. He never replied. But about a month later, I heard through our mutual connection that Ezra had enrolled in a community college 2 towns over. He was working part-time at a bookstore and keeping to himself. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me peace. In time, I began to rebuild. Not just my house, but myself. I went back to therapy, faced the parts of me I had avoided. The guilt, the loneliness, the hunger to be seen. And slowly, I stopped needing someone else to define my worth. Ezra didn't stay in my life, but he didn't need to. He reminded me of a truth I'd buried, that sometimes the most profound connections are the ones that teach us how to let go before we cause more harm. Thank you for listening to this episode's story. Don't forget to subscribe and check out more content to discover the many fascinating shades of life.